Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to the 58th episode of the Perfectly Imperfect Spiritual Podcast. I'm your host, Marta the medium. I'm a psychic medium, angel card reader, spiritual teacher, and a soul mentor. And I'm so glad that you're here for another conversation that invites us to explore what truly healing really means. And today's guest is someone whose work bridges science, compassion, and lived experience. And she spent more than 2 decades transforming mental health care in South Africa with a deep focus on trauma informed and harm reduction based addiction care. I'm going to introduce her properly in a second. I have her beautiful biography here. But first of all, I wanted to say welcome, Elsa, to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege.
Okay, and now I'm going to read for anyone who's just new to Elsa's work. So, Elizabeth Berk has dedicated the past 24 years to transforming mental health care in South Africa, with a particular focus on trauma informed counseling. Her expertise in addiction care, harm reduction, and trauma informed approaches has earned her recognition as a leading voice in the field. During the pandemic, Berg successfully adapted her practice to online counseling, launching TherapyNow in 2021, an innovative online mental health platform specializing in compassionate harm reduction focused addiction care. The platform has since expanded globally, serving clients across continents. In 2024, she established Therapy Now nonprofit to provide free counseling services and support research in both mental health and harm reduction. As a member of the Global Mental Health Peer Network representing South Africa, Berg combines her professional expertise with lived experience of addiction, anxiety, and depression. She contributes to World Health Organization research, advocating for compassionate approaches to addiction and mental health treatment. Her work challenging stigma and treatment resistance was highlighted at the 2023 South African Mental Health Conference. Berg has co authored several academic papers bringing valuable perspectives as both a practitioner and someone with lived experience. Her dual role has strengthened her advocacy for accessible, empathetic mental health care. Elizabeth, Elsa, again, welcome to the Perfectly Imperfect Spiritual Podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a lot. Sorry. I was
Oh
that is
no,
a
but I
lot
think
of
it's really
reading.
beautiful and it gives context to people about what you do. So I always find that interesting because anyone who's new to the podcast, you might not know, but this is a completely unscripted podcast. The only thing that I ask my guests is to give me their beautiful biography, and then we just go with the flow and we co-create that episode. So that biography, the introduction is always that anchor, and we just go wherever we want with that. I always like to start in a way I'm thinking, in a way I have my own patterns about the why behind the work. So I'm curious, do you believe that true healing begins with walking through our own shadows? And what was your personal journey, the path that led you here? And how has your own healing shaped the woman and professional you've become?
So it's such a I think complex question always for me because it obviously brings up quite a lot of emotion. And I think that with a healing journey and I'm a big believer in the shadow work really. And I feel like it's such a it's become such a almost want to say like people talk about it all the time, but it's such a heavy actual
Mm,
subject. And I'm a just on a side, I love the work of Carl Jung, so I really do follow a lot of his work, and I love Buddhism. So that's a huge part of my combination of where I go through when I look at the work and healing. But for me, addiction, so from a really young age, I really struggled with life. I just found life really hard. And I always felt like I was unbelievably different. And it's quite a, I think, scary place to be when you're little, because your parents are your caregivers, and there's no anchor in a family when you're feeling so different. So yeah, always felt really different. And I really started self-soothing, I would say, with substances. And when I was 19, I entered my first rehabilitation center, and it wasn't a fun experience, to be honest. I
Mm-hmm.
know for many it's not, but I think for me, and it's a huge part of why I'm in advocacy with addiction care, is because the status quo, I'm now 44 years old, hasn't changed from when I was 19 to now. We're still looking at the same philosophies and the same way of treating addiction. um, but when I got sober, or I started going through my healing process, I started really remembering why I started substances. It wasn't like I just um, stumbled and fell and started using. And the reality is, in the last 3 years, actually, like, I've been working in addiction care for 25 years, but only really in the last 3 years that I start looking at um, why I am who I am, how I got here, and digging deep. And the reality is how horrible it is, and I sometimes still get quite emotional about it, is that I was raped when I was 6, and I had no memory of it whatsoever until I stopped using and started entering some kind of safety in my life. And it's really something that stays with you, whether you know you want it there or not. So that is a small part
Mm-hmm.
of the whole journey, but it's really played a massive role in needing substances. And also the complexity around childhood sexual abuse is the family, in my case, keeps it a secret. It becomes a secret. And only this year, this literally has been the most the hardest year, I would say, in my journey. I left a highly abusive relationship at the beginning of the year, and part of that was recognizing that my childhood abuse was still so prevalent in my being, that I was still drawn, even though the abuse was different, it was still the same. Sorry, I'm getting so emotional.
No, no,
So
no.
I it was like the relationship ended, and it broke open this like world that I kind of have been dealing with in therapy. I go to therapy, I love my therapist, um but I wasn't willing to face, if that makes, like, the shadow, like, head on, and be like, this is it. And I've always believed in generational trauma. I'm a massive advocate for generational trauma, but I started really looking at and I've always done yoga, and
Mm-hmm.
but I've never really done it, I think, to the level that I have in this year. And um yeah, like, whether I like it or not, um I can feel the generational paths of my ancestors in my being, and that sexual abuse is something that my mother definitely suffered, and my grandmother definitely suffered. And it's something I can't change. And what I can do, however, is make it into a superpower, if you want to put it like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I've really started looking at alchemy and um tapping into those kind of um sides of my life. And so really transforming power into something beautiful, because I didn't realize how powerless my ancestors and I was as a woman, um for generations. So with that honesty comes family denial. So I've had I have no relationship with my family, and it's been a really empowering but lonely journey that I'm embracing, because I actually like being alone a lot. So yeah, so that's kind of what's led me here. Um, so when
Mm.
we started speaking, I was like, I embrace any form of collaboration or healing, because I do really believe that the universe has magic. Um, Everyone has magic, and it's just how we tap into it. So
Mm. I
that's
love it. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I know so many viewers and listeners are going to relate, and those who are new, even to this channel. I went myself from an abusive relationship. I come from a family, both of my parents were alcoholics, my sister's addicted to drugs, alcohol. So lots of trauma. And then I try to help and raise awareness to other people as well. But I know that conversation is going to bring so much comfort and then like power to many. I want to generalize women, but it's not only women, people who have been going, or maybe they've experienced abuse. I'm curious, what advice would you give to those people who went through childhood abuse, who are still caught in that family dynamics? Like, what gave you courage to leave, and how they can support themselves when they feel that no one around understands them or tries to deny their reality?
I think that I know for myself that when you start speaking about a particular childhood families' defenses are immediate. They become, in my experience, defensive, because they've got to protect their narrative and what's happening for them. And I just needed to decide for myself that that's their story. I can't change it, but I
Mm,
have to allow myself to live in my story, to live in my truth. And and I lived with my family throughout that period of time. And I honestly now I'm just like, as long as I believe me, like, and the opposite, everyone talks about the opposite of addiction is connection, and I never realized that the connection is me. I need
mm,
to connect with me. I need to connect with my truth and what I identify with, and find one safe person that I can talk to, whatever that person is, whoever it is, and just connect with that person. And even if you are still in that situation, I think the biggest things with family in particular is breaking ties is so easy to say, but doing it is something completely different. And to have compassion for yourself and just be like, it's a journey. I'm doing the best that I can with what I've got. I think that to me is just, you've got to just have so much compassion for yourself.
mm. Do you think we can talk a little bit or a lot about redefining care? So, like, I keep hearing, like, from systems to compassion. What keeps coming to my mind? Well, I have not faced that type of addiction. Well, I was in an abusive relationship, and for me, it was very codependent. So, in a way, I can relate to that story. But my sister, she's addicted to drugs and alcohol, and I have those early memories of her being taken to psychiatric wards and being like strapped with the leather belts when being under influence, and it's been like traumatic for me as a child to witness. But I can only imagine her being locked in all those facilities in order to be, well, cured or healed. I'm just like getting lots of heartache. Well, based on your like lived experience, but also because you've worked for over 20 years in mental health. When you think back to those early days, and if you think about your work experience, well, what made you realize that traditional models weren't enough, and that something deeper and more compassionate was needed?
So for me, I mean, I hear about your sister, but I also hear about you. Do you know, when family members go through the same level of trauma as the individuals that are suffering or struggling with substances. And what I kept hearing is, one, family needs to be allowed to make their decisions and have their boundaries. But if we look at people that are struggling with addiction and we were to put the word depression there, rather, we would be treating it completely differently. So if we had somebody come to us and say, I feel depressed, or I'm down,
Mm,
or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm anxious, we would mollycoddle, give them a hug, talk to them,
mm,
really listen. Yet the WHO defines mental health and substance abuse, or use, I don't call it abuse, substance use, under the same umbrella. Yet we've completely isolated and separated substance use as actually something completely different. And I think that that's created stigma, which is, it's not like depression. It is something that if somebody is struggling with addiction, that means that they are going to steal, they are going to cheat, they are going to lie, they are going to be aggressive, they are going to be this whole lesson. I think the systems kind of set it up for individuals to end up going down that road, because their first encounter often with help is judgment, and not, why are you struggling with substance use? How did you start substance use? Why do you think you're using? It doesn't become a conversation. It immediately becomes a, often individuals immediately get, it becomes a criminal activity instead of a human problem. And that's a huge part of why I felt like it needed to change. But I also, we all are addicted to something. We all need soothing, all of us.
mm,
It doesn't matter. We've just decided as a society which ones we deem not okay and which ones we deem okay. And I often quote, David Beckham speaks in really openly about his addiction to soccer. Yet we throw money at him and we really like encourage him to play. But he missed the birth of his son. Do you know what I mean? The consequences were there, yet we praise and really lift that up. So we've got to really decide, like when we look at addiction, which ones we've decided we're not okay with and which ones we are okay with. So I think that that's the societal stigma around it has really driven people to not ask for help as soon as they start seeing that there's a problem. And then they only ask for help way down the line when it could have maybe been intervened quite early on.
mm. And I think, well, I have various things popping into my mind, but also, well, first of all, like the labels can be scary, but also certain people might not be aware that they are addicted because of definitions of mental health, definitions of addiction. So could you talk a little bit more about what addiction is? And then maybe
So
ways of self-soothing.
yeah, so addiction for me is literally just solving a problem, an emotional problem. Is looking at how I am struggling and I'm not coping and I'm not getting my needs met. So I am going to find something that's going to make me feel better. And Carl Jung and many people talk about addiction, and I agree with it in the sense that it feels like a warm hug. It does. It feels warm and cozy and comfortable, and it's a hiding space. And yeah, so I think that's, I really struggled with an eating disorder from when I was really, really young, and it was normalized because it's just, food. So
Mm,
it's not such a big deal. Um, so for me, it's about not just parents, but also caregivers, teachers, when they start seeing signs from a really young age that kids are struggling, to give them the space and safety to be able to talk about what's going on for them. I think that would really change the way care is given, but also the trajectory of somebody having an addiction or not to something that could be destructive.
hmm. And for anyone who has been labeled with certain diagnoses, or maybe they've been called that they are addicted to something. Well, I'm hoping that this conversation that you're going to bring some hope to those who maybe heard that their addiction is a sign of failure. And then, like, from your experience, what do most people still get wrong about addiction and then recovery? Because I'm sure, well, this is what I feel like, so many people, those who are addicted, but maybe their families as well. In a way, I feel I can relate to this. They consider relapse as something very, as a sign maybe of failure, or something like they have done something wrong. So if we can talk about that.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. So no, so I love that, because my thing is, when somebody I'm not don't love the term relapse, because I always think it's so mean. Like, when somebody, like I said, when somebody's we often refer to them as a recurrence of symptoms, and I say we have to celebrate the victories in, and not make the goal abstinence based care, because individuals that are struggling with substances are going to trip and fall. Like, that is okay. Like, it's part of the journey. It's about getting up, talking about it, and keep going, because you can still have so many wins, even if you slip. Like, it shouldn't be this thing that's like, no, you've got to go right at the beginning. And then so we at Therapy Now have completely moved away from abstinence based care. If individuals come and say, we wanted to be abstinent, cool, no problem. What are your goals? What are the short-term goals? What are the long-term goals? It's a conversation. And I think that that's, for me, the biggest thing is that I don't like labels, because I don't identify with a label. I identify with me. And I think it's
Mhm.
such a personal thing that individuals get to decide for themselves, like, what would be good for me. And I think that's part of addiction, is the autonomy of a person's been taken away. Your voice is gone. So creating a voice again, to be able to say, this is what I would like my journey to look like. I am going to try and trust myself again to try and build that. Um, I don't know. Does that kind of answer it? Or
Yes, no, what it does, and then I'm having like more thoughts. I'm even thinking about my own journey after I left an abusive relationship. Then I thought, oh, I'm going to try maybe. There's a trauma center that you can access via the public health system. This was the most re-traumatizing experience. I haven't accessed it. I had only one interview, and during this interview, I felt like so horrible because they wanted to take away my voice and sign documents that they are going to be in charge of me. And I'm like, no, 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 I just want to heal. Like, no, I can think, you're not going to decide. Because then the fear-based thoughts were, oh, they're going to lock me somewhere. Yeah. And there's no way I'm doing that. But then they started, the therapist, the head of the center, started telling me about being a bad mother. Or like during that one conversation, I'm like, I'm out of here. So that is, well, you spoke to me when you mentioned that we can give voice and that we can speak for ourselves. So I hope that anyone who's watching it or listening can know that you do not have to stick to a therapist or to a therapy that doesn't make you feel safe, empowered, that you always have a voice and that you can choose something else. And then with your type of work that you do, you offer online services. So for anyone who feels like, oh, I don't have anything in the place where I live, like, could you talk about options
yeah,
and more about
so
how we can like really listen to ourselves and do what's best for us?
I love that. So part of which is why I started Therapy Now was because I couldn't grasp the fact that I kept on having to ask other people what would be best for me. Do you know, like, but I knew in my body, like, if we
Mm-hmm.
just take a moment to be like, how do I feel? Like, what do I need? But that gets taken away really quickly by a system, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, and I'm not anti the system, because I think there are some things that do work,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately, I do believe that so part of what we try and do at Therapy Now is that individual or couples or whoever gets to decide their journey for themselves. So they choose who they want to talk to and what language they want to talk to, at their pace, at their length. And really to set their goals, and for it to be a collaboration. Like, hey, this is what I need. Okay, how do we work together to try and figure out how we can get you there? Do you know what I mean? You have the authority,
Mm.
because not just with abuse, but with addiction and anything really regarding healing, I think people's voices get taken away really quickly. And we don't give enough credit for individuals really knowing actually what road they want to go down, but they get told that's not the right road, or you shouldn't go back to that relationship. No, you should be allowed to do whatever you want. I'm going to hold your hand, and we're going to work through it. That's how, do you know what I mean? That's collaboration. Um, yeah. So I'm a
Mm.
big believer. I just feel like in my own journey, I went from 19, I was so young, and went into a facility from an extremely toxic family, and being told this is what you need to do and this is what you need to do, and doing it because you're desperate. I was so desperate. And I had no decision really as to, well, what would be good for me. And I was so fearful of relapse, because I was told, like, if you will die and you will do this, and it's not true. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying,
Mm-hmm.
like, why are we putting so much fear into people when some people can't stop using? And you know it happens. You still get to have relationships, and be a good mom. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit, or a lot again, about how friends, family members can support those who are now healing from their addiction or anything? Because um, I know, well, for a fact, working with my clients, but also for myself, first of all, like, well, sometimes people don't even know what to do, which means they distance themselves, which might be really challenging. But like for those who really are ready to learn ways of supporting their friends and family, what would you say they can do?
So my once again, to have the autonomy and to work with someone that can give you, to help you guide on the decisions you would like to make. So if you feel that for yourself you need a week of distance from the individual to decide what you'd like to do, go
Mm-hmm.
for it. Do you know what I mean? And just be like, that's okay. Because we're I know for myself, I'm drawn to individuals that struggle and find life hard, and that's fine. Do you know what I mean? And yes, I see my shadow in them, which is part of why I get drawn in and all of that kind of stuff. But to really invest in your own journey, and to decide for yourself what that journey would look like, and not to have people tell you. I mean, I think for me the biggest thing is, I hear individuals saying, I've got to cut full contact. I've got to kick them out of the house. I've got to do this. Well, no, what would you like to do? Do you know what I mean? What would you feel you'd like to do? And for I work with a lot of couples that struggle with substance use, where one individual struggles with substance use and the individual doesn't. And we work really well in saying, okay, so if your partner does decide to use, what are the boundaries around that? Let's figure out what they can't use at your house. They have to go and use outside of the house. And really work with your partner to decide, what are the boundaries that we're going to work in to make sure I'm safe, because it triggers me when you're using, and I don't want to be around you when you're using. So, what measures are we both going to put in place for us both to be safe? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's
Yeah.
something we
And
work
I
with.
love that you're talking about like both, well, the word parties, both people, in terms of a couple, for instance, they should, it's not the right word, but they can prioritize their own safety. They can prioritize and really think about themselves, because I really also feel there is that, well, expectation for the family members to concentrate on the person who is recovering, let's say, from addiction, but then they're not really prioritizing their own mental health, which doesn't, I think, essentially support the person who's being in need of maybe support of family or friends. Um,
100%.
yeah.
So I think what also happens is that, well, I know what I often see is that the person that's using becomes almost like the scapegoat, where
Mm,
they're the problem, they're the issue, they're what's going on. So there's a lot of trauma that's happening for the family or for the partner. And it's really important for them, for the partner or the family, to work through that trauma so they can show up for themselves and then decide what the limitations are for them. So I just think that as much work needs to be done for both parties. It can't just be all the focus is on one person.
hmm. So you're also a member of the Global Mental Health Peer Network, and you've contributed to research with the World Health Organization. Like, how do you keep humanity and heart at the center of your work when so much of it happens at a policy or structural level? How do you manage to bring that
So
those components?
I yeah, so I work with amazing humans. I think that's the one
Mm,
part that really helps. And the we all have the same goal, which is, well, mine is I love people. Sometimes I feel really angry that I do. Like quite they so horrible and mean sometimes. But I believe in humanity, and I do believe that there are really good people out there. Um, and there has to be good. There is no ways that life is the way. And I do also believe with policies to challenge policies. And that's one of the big
mm,
things that we do. We're busy writing a proposal at the moment for the WHO around dignity and human rights. And like there's great policies, but they're not put in practice.
mm,
Um, so there's the WHO has amazing policies, but when we look at what's happening in the system, it's not being applied. Um, so I think we all have a responsibility to look after each other, but to also look after ourselves and to. I'm a big nature person, so I spend a lot of time outdoors, and I'm really lucky because I live in South Africa, so you can be outdoors 365.
mm,
But I believe we're interlinked with nature, and we've just found really violent, horrible ways to dislocate ourselves from nature. So I look at plants and nature and I think about how they're able to survive and thrive. And I believe the same for good humans. So that's the way I think I
mm,
survived disease at this stage.
mm. And for anyone who's watching it, listening to this podcast, who got curious because maybe they're health professionals, maybe they're in that position of helping others. Could you talk about a possibility of making a difference as an individual, like what they can change when they're operating within a system, so they feel like they don't have much power, but what can they change in their perhaps attitude, language? uh, I'm curious about that.
No, absolutely. And I think it is in particular is for countries where there is I mean, we're very lucky, I think, for both of us that we live in countries where the rules or the policies are fluid. It's all inclusive. But there are so many countries where, you know, child brides and um, mental health is severely frowned upon. Being LGBTQ plus is being frowned upon, like it's even illegal. So I think that does make it really, really tricky, and particularly if you are working in the health profession and you know in your
Mm-hmm.
heart what you're seeing is not what you're believing in. I think it makes it unbelievably difficult because you're fighting a system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's about creating space for yourself to figure out what you'd like to do and to talk about. Because I know for myself, working with individuals in countries where it is illegal, you will get taken to prison. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
just like, let's be outspoken, let's talk about it at work. Well, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's dangerous. Like, it's not
Mm-hmm.
maybe a good idea. But to find ways that you can create partnerships with organizations that will help you to have a voice in what you're saying and represent what you want to do and change, so that it doesn't feel like what you're doing in those situations is nothing. So the other thing that I do really advocate for in those spaces is just to be that safe person, that if somebody does come and they want to talk about stuff that they're doing, to give them the space to be open and honest. And I think, and to be confidential and have a containment around that space. I think that creates one person that just believes in another person,
Mm-hmm.
um, is all you can really do. And it's a lot, because it creates a domino effect.
Mm-hmm. And how can those people create their own sense of safety? Because you've talked about them creating a safety container for their people they are supporting, but how they can support themselves if they feel like there's no one there, and there's that pressure of needing to create safety, but like how what they can do to feel like more aligned, centered.
So like I said, I'm a huge believer in yoga, but to really go inside oneself and to just sit with yourself and know that, I mean, sometimes we don't feel safe. And I feel like with the world, what's happening at the moment, it's really such a flippant statement to say things like, sit with yourself and know that you are safe, you are your safety, when
Mm-hmm.
the world doesn't feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
is really, really hard. But to have your own back. And I think that we don't allow ourselves to have, we look for other people to have our back. Have your own back and create your safety inside of yourself, because I believe that we are united with the universe. So if you're sitting with yourself and you're safe in yourself, just be with you. You're safe.
Mm-hmm. And do you believe that healing has a spiritual dimension? And not necessarily, I'm not talking about religion, so nothing religious, but that sense of something greater guiding us back to ourselves, for instance. And have you witnessed moments in your work, in your life, that felt like grace or divine timing?
It's so funny you say that. I have a board that I'm looking at right now that says divine timing in capital
You do.
letters. Yeah, I do. I'm
Okay.
like, if I could turn my computer, look at it. So I it's like, yeah, I feel like sometimes when I talk about some things, I feel a bit like, woo. Like, I come from a very religious, my parents were very religious, but I am not religious. So I've nothing against religion. People can be religious. I don't mind it at all. I there is no ways that I survived my family and there isn't a spiritual world. I think that for me is, my family, besides being toxic, were severely violent. And yeah, there's absolutely no ways that I didn't have some intervention or something looking out for me. I look at that, there's no ways, number one. And then I have a ton of faith. I sometimes don't know what it is that I have faith in, but
Mhm.
I feel like my happy place, like I say, is nature. But I feel like there is so much abundance of love that I experience and feel, and I see things which I know are, so anyone that's listening to this, please go, it's called a gennet. I don't know if anyone knows what it is. I didn't even know what a gennet was, but a couple of months. So I've had, I have animals that come to me, and I've had owls in the last, the beginning of the year, that sat and watched me from my bedroom window for days. And I then built an owl house and they left, and I thought it was so
Mm.
ironic because, well, not ironic, but spiritual in its own way. It's like you want to keep it when you've got just got to let it go. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're beautiful and they were looking over me, and they were amazing. And then when they left, I have an amazing dog who definitely looks after me. I had a genet arrive. I didn't even know what it was. A genet arrived in my home and sat in my bedroom for, I didn't even know that it was there until I got up. And it's, I don't know if you know what a genet is. I didn't, it's like a, it looks like it's a huge cat. Um, and it just sat in my room. And I had to phone the wilderness people to ask them to come and collect it because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what to do. Um, and they arrived and they didn't know what it was either. So we, anyway, yeah, so there's things like that that happen. And I believe that I mirror, we all mirror life. So whatever's reflected back is really what is happening. I don't know if that makes sense. So I,
Yeah, it does.
yeah, so I yeah, I have so much faith. Sometimes I feel like I don't because life gets really, really hard. But I do believe in the timing of life, and that there is divine timing. Like, I just know.
Mm-hmm.
So I trust that and I keep going. And yeah, I have it in my work a lot of the time where I just know something's off in my
Mm-hmm.
soul, and I will phone my colleagues and I will say, just watch, something's off with this person. I'm not sure what it is, just watch. And I'll, in a week's time, we'll find out that they took half our clients. Do you know what I mean? And or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, where it's just like, I'm like, okay, so now I need to listen louder to that part when it says something's off. So it's yeah, things like that where
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like,
I love it because, well, you've written academic papers and contributed to research, yet your work feels deeply human and intuitive. So I'm also curious, well, you've talked about it, but how do you balance that evidence based knowledge with the intuitive, compassionate side of care? And do you still keep certain things about using intuition or the spiritual realm to yourself? Because there, it's another stigma. There's so much taboo about that part of let's say universe. There's still some people believe that perhaps the logical mind or the research and is going to be superior to following intuition or even accepting that there can be that invisible support. So I'm just curious, how do you balance it for yourself, and do you sometimes uh, talk about it in public spaces?
so I am a very private person. So I don't even know why I'm telling you all. So I'm a very private person, but I have a very like I think a lot of us do, a really close knit community of like 3 or 4 people that I'm very close to. Some days I don't speak to anyone for like a whole day. But
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to research and academics, I do not believe it can be separated. So I speak to academics and CEOs, and I'm just like, if my intuition says the paper doesn't feel like it aligns, I won't go with it. And if it goes back to what we spoke about in the beginning, I know what I see, I know what I know, and I believe in me. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a non-ego belief. It's a I know my truth. And if you don't like it, then don't publish the paper. Like, I really
Mm-hmm.
don't care. Like, makes no difference to my life. I'm still going to show up as myself, and that's kind of what I go with. And I believe it, and I know that this is what happens. It kind of like it. The people that are not supposed to be around leave, and that is what is supposed to happen. So I recently wrote a paper for the New York Times. Last week we wrote about Tylenol and um the claims around neurodiversity and Tylenol. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you,
I've
yes,
heard
so
it.
it,
Yes.
so it's come up quite a lot, and I do believe a lot of the spiritual world and what I experience is part of neurodiversity. That people that are amazing and special and sensitive and in touch with themselves are a threat. And I think that that's part of why there's a need to ostracize. So, and I wrote that in the paper. I said,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that is what's happening is people that are any struggle with mental health is actually not, it's spirituality that's happening. And we deem that as something different. It's not. It's, we all have it. It's just whether we willing to tap into it or not. um
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And as we all know, or maybe not all, knowledge is power. And then various systems or people, they want to keep us, well, in check, let's say. They don't want to speak publicly that you can, that we all have that voice within ourselves, that there is that intuition. But another thing that popped into my mind, I always have those various thoughts, is that I truly believe, well, everyone's brain is wired differently, but as a psychic medium, um, it's interesting because my own, like one of my children, my son's autistic and he's got ADHD, so he is going to be labeled as neurodivergent. But interestingly, without even me knowing, I've worked whether with my photographer for my photo shoot, whether the proofreader of my book, they've been all neurodivergent. And I just love those people. And I don't choose them based on that fact, but I sometimes feel that being sensitive and then open to this spiritual realm, it's it is a type of neurodivergency. I just find it fascinating, that aspect. Yeah.
No, I had so my I got diagnosed with adult ADHD. I was like, definitely had it most of my life. But it's actually just a sensitivity to audio and currency, currents and life. And my son has ADHD and I have severe dyslexia, so I was never able to read. So I mean, I can read, but it's really hard for me. But those were all seen as things that are shameful, and you're not fitting into the box. And
Mm-hmm.
I now look at that and I'm like, no, it makes me amazing. Like I I don't really care. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
really, I just like, and my son struggles with life because people are mean, people are
Mm-hmm.
horrible. And I hold a lot of space for him. I'm in no ways his therapist. He's 15. I drive him insane, I think, because he's 15 and he's like, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
teenager. Um, but his sensitivity, I have to believe, which is part of where faith comes in, is that I'm doing it differently to how my parents did, and I embrace sensitivity. So I think, yeah, like I love, yeah. So I label it myself as neurodivergent, but I dive into those spaces. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What does hope look like to you? Not the kind that glosses over pain, but the quiet, steady kind that shows up even in darkness.
I think it hope goes intertwined with the feeling of divine timing. I think it's just there has to be something. I just know in my being that we are all interlinked, and I just I think with I was deemed hopeless so many times in my life by adults, in particular, school, neighbors, society. And I look at that and I just think that when people don't understand something, they throw it away. Like,
Mm.
yeah, it's easier. So I believe that hope is created through connections and life. Like if you're alive, there's hope. So that's what I want to say. Like it's divine timing, but for me, the sun is hope. Like the sun shines. Like that is warmth. Um, so I, when my parents were particularly violent, I used to stand outside and there was like an alley at the back of our house. And I used to just stand in the wind. I have no idea, like, like, but I still find such comfort in just standing in the wind. And I think it was just the feeling like there's something bigger. It's wind. It's created by a planet. It's not like no one had any intervention with it. It's just there. So that's hope for me.
Hmm. I love it. Yeah. And I hope that's going to give hope to those who feel like they're not understood, they're misunderstood, but also those who are struggling with whatever is going internally or externally in their life. I feel like knowing that there is that bigger force, whatever it is, whatever your own beliefs are, it's truly empowering. And many people, as we've touched upon today, there are many people who struggle, but many people still find it hard to speak about their own mental health struggles. Do you think it's important for people to be open with their mental health struggles or how they can navigate it, especially because we're living in the societies that, they are on one hand like more accommodating, but still very judgmental. So how can we tap into our authentic self, be courageous, own our truth and voice, but then, yeah, how can we navigate
So I
being
think,
part of the society?
yeah, 100%. So I think it goes to what we spoke about earlier on with labels
Mm-hmm,
and you deciding for yourself
mm-hmm,
what, and I speak to my own therapist about labels. And I'm like, I hate labels. And he's like,
mm-hmm,
well, the nice thing about a label is that it gives you insight into what is going on. So if you can take whatever label you've got or want to give yourself and look into it and read up on it and understand it. And I love the WHO guidelines because they're so kind. Um, and look at that and then see who you feel safe with that you can share that with. I think that's really what would be part of what I think it's really such a personal thing. I think everyone needs to decide for themselves how much they want to share and how much they don't.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm. And is there anything that you think, I'm just thinking about media and culture, the labels, the language. What do you wish we would stop saying, and what do you wish we would start saying instead, in terms of how addiction, mental health are portrayed in those spaces?
I think the biggest thing is, and I spoke about it recently with the peer network as well, is that we have identified struggle as being a problem. And life is a struggle. Like it needs to be normalized. Like life is, we're born struggling. Like, but instead we look at struggle and we go, there's something wrong with me. And I think that to me needs to be right at the beginning of where we change all of
Mm-hmm,
this and really look at, no, it's so okay to find life hard, school hard, doing your homework hard, getting up in the morning, that's hard. Like that is okay. It doesn't need to be given a label. Um, because it's about talking and understanding as to why it's hard, but almost normalizing that life can be really hard and that's okay. Um, so I think we've made life being difficult into something that's it's supposed to be comfortable. I don't think it is. Um, I think there's parts of it, yes. I think a war is not okay, and I think there's extremes that are absolutely not okay. But finding life difficult, it's normalized, and we should normalize that and make it more of a partnership as to how do we lean into each other to make it easier. Um, so that's I think that's, and I think when we are in communities, spiritual communities, mental health communities, research communities, is to not ostracize individuals that are outside of the community. I think
Mm-hmm.
that happens so often. And it's so terrible because that just creates another stigma. So it would be so much healthier, I think, if I like, even with addiction, like I get so irritated because addiction and mental health has become like, this is it. And I'm like, well, it leans straight into
Mm-hmm.
meditation. It leans straight into body work. It shouldn't all be so separate. It should
Mm-hmm.
be together. And healing should be in the same thing. And mindfulness should be in it's all interlinked, but we've grouped it all separately to make a profit. Um, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is the other subject or anything that you feel the viewers and listeners should hear today about anything that we haven't covered that comes to your mind?
I just think that we're not alone. And I think that is, we all, I think, deeply want a connection and don't want to be alone, but it's also okay to be alone and to not be alone. So it doesn't have to be this like all or nothing, it can be both. So I think, yeah, I think society's really destroyed how humans see themselves. And I just think taking the time to really get to know yourself is one of the most magical journeys anyone can go on.
I love it. Would that be the final message, or is there any other messages that you would like to share with the viewers and listeners towards the end of this
No, I
conversation?
no, I can't think of anything. I'm like, just hug your dog. I'm like, animals are great huggers too. I think that to me is like one of the only thing, like we're all interlinked.
I
That's the
love
biggest thing
it.
for me.
And finally, where can people find you and how they can work with you?
So we've got an online website at Therapy Now Global. Yes, we are South Africans based in South Africa, but we work with anybody in the world. We have amazing counselors who are all human beings, who have their own lived experience and stories, but are really just there to hold space. So, yeah, Therapy Now.
Thank you, Elsa, so much for your honesty, your heart, and your voice. I truly believe that conversations like this remind us that healing isn't linear and it's a return to love, to truth, and to compassion for ourselves and others. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And I want to say thank you to all of the viewers and listeners. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.